I'm going to show people how they can have a little stress-less break in 30 seconds. So obviously, Jean, you and I are outside, so I moved myself onto the sidewalk. So I'm going to have everybody, if they're listening, take a pause if you can in a safe area and close your eyes. And then take a nice deep inhale for 3 seconds through your nose. And take a sigh out of your mouth. Let's do that one more time. Take a nice deep inhale through the nose. And a nice deep sigh out of your mouth. And then slowly open your eyes.
You know, you don't really know who you are or what you are until you put a really big challenge in front of you.
Fear is an asset and ally here to help you be magnificent.
This crazy, silly, stupid idea to run across the Sahara Desert.
You did make it this time, but you said if you didn't make it, you would try again and again.
Everybody's connected to nature, connected to music, to their families, and now we're going to build a world that doesn't have racism and war and starving kids.
I kept telling myself, run at me and just keep smiling.
Hey, Katherine.
Hey there.
How's it going?
It's going well, thank you.
So just to kick us off, as I like to do on these walking podcasts, before you introduce yourself, which I want to get to quick, can you maybe describe for people who are walking or running along with us right now where you're walking?
Absolutely. So I live in Fort Lee, and I'm really lucky that there's this beautiful double wide road with a kind of a median that's all trees and grass in between, which I'm walking on. And the thing that's really nice is that there are other people doing the same, walking their dogs, taking a jog, chatting on the phone. So you may hear my voice change because I have my mask on, but if there's no one around me, I'll pull it down.
Oh, is your mask on now?
Yeah, it's going to come down.
Oh, it sounds totally fine.
Oh, good, yeah. And then I take it down if there's no one around me. It's a little thing we do. But yeah,
are you finding that more people are out now than have been like in, the weeks and months past?
No, it's the same.
People have been coming out. That's great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just like been this slow, steady stream. Most people here, here in New Jersey for sure, we're in a slow reopening. Business are reopening, but a lot of people are commuters to New York City, in offices. So I'm sure I'm like many here who are still working from home.
Right. Yeah. So would love to talk about that. We can probably talk a little bit about that, but before we kind of do that, to set some context, can you introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. I'm Katherine Adamenko, and I'm really excited to be here after working with you. And I'm the Manager of Wellbeing at Ropes Gray. And I met Jean because we decided to run a global physical activity challenge right after we went in lockdown.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that you were going to do that before we went into lockdown. So when we were launched, just so I can set the context for everybody, most of the people know we have this new employee empowerment program for companies to engage their employees. And, as we were getting ready to launch this in January, I sent a whole bunch of emails out to, people, kind of cold emailing. Katherine was one of the first people to get back to me and was really one of the very instrumental in helping us get it off the ground with her feedback as we were in the last months of building it, and one of the first companies to come on. And we couldn't be more thrilled because the firm that you work for, Ropes Gray, which you mentioned, just so everybody knows, is one of the top law firms in the world. And just an incredible organization, and one that we're incredibly honored to work with, and really helped set us on the right path to launching this employee empowerment program, which has been really successful. So first, just wanted to thank you for being one of the pioneers on that.
Oh, you're so welcome.
And so we were going into this like, it's funny because when we first started talking in January, like everything was about health and well-being and how this was going to help, kind of like this global fitness challenge that you mentioned. But then like COVID happened and it took on like a totally new light.
Yeah.
And I thought that those two things together would set the context for a really interesting chat for this podcast.
Yeah, we were planning, like most of my other planning that we had set. We were originally going to do this in September. We thought it would be really fun just right after Labor Day and kick off one of our first global well-being initiatives. But here's the story. So you had already come into the office. We were already ready to go. We were waiting for you to get the interteam set up. Mm-hmm. We had our schedule. We're like, okay, great. We're ready. We're ready, but we don't need to talk for the next 3 months. Mm-hmm. And then leadership said, it'd be a really great idea if we could do something fun and physical together. I kid you not, within a week, we launched the challenge.
Yep. Just as everybody's like starting to work from home.
Oh my God. It was a huge team effort.
Yep.
And yeah, it was amazing. We just put it all in gear. Our communications team is extraordinary and led the way on this one.
Yep.
And, and also what normally would have taken, as you mentioned, your onboarding, like, yeah, it's easy to get the platform set up, but then all the documents and all the info sheets, it's not the easiest thing. Nope. Yep, we just snapped into gear. Thank God the platform was easy to use, but it was extraordinary. And the immediate feedback we got was amazing because we launched on April 3rd. I think all our offices closed, I think the week of March 20th.
Yep.
So we were only home for 2 weeks. And the feedback we got was just extraordinary, which is what we could have hoped for. And the feedback we got was, we are so excited we are so proud to work for a company who cares about our company. Excuse me.
Yeah.
We're so happy to work for a firm. I'm still getting used to it.
It's a firm.
For those of you who don't know, I come from corporate wellness world and not the legal world. So anyway. Yeah, so we were really excited.
Let's, because I just thought it was so interesting how like this was coming together. It was like this incredible demarcation, like this whole coming together pre-COVID, and then COVID happened, and obviously it took on another light. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk about, why things like wellness are important to a firm like Ropes and Gray, or to a company, in the non-legal world that might be like Ropes and Gray. Why is wellness important generally, but then how is it taken on a new light after COVID?
Sure. So my role as a manager of wellbeing is very new in the idea of, I know we could talk about this in a minute, the difference between wellness and wellbeing, and there is a difference to talk about, right? But about 4 years ago, the American Bar Association did a survey of about 3,000 lawyers and found, really people knew, but the numbers were in, that there were higher rates of things like anxiety and depression and suicide and substance use and problem drinking. Because like lawyers, for example, track 20% higher in this in the legal industry. So there was a critical moment, and the numbers don't lie. And so they created the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing, which also included the entire legal sector, including law schools, legal entities, and business support. So it wasn't just specifically for lawyers, it's anyone involved in the legal industry. And they gave recommendations. They created a toolkit, a guide for people. And we'll, again, I want to talk about this a little later, the Wellbeing Pledge. And so having a dedicated person in wellness or well-being was already the zeitgeist, or I would have been out of a job. I've been doing this for almost a decade. I've been doing this for almost a decade. But from my very first job, I was the first person ever to have that role. So it's been a little bit of a pioneering role as well, which has been fantastic. And so coupled between the zeitgeist of companies and firms recognizing the benefits of having a dedicated person building out a wellness or well-being program is really beneficial on a whole spectrum. And this is where the difference between wellness and well-being comes in. Wellness is all about much more of the physical wellness. Like you can, old-fashioned wellness programs had things like lunch and learns with a nutritionist, or mammograms and flu shots, and maybe the occasional newsletter, or celebrating Heart Month. So there were those types. But well-being, and this is what really attracted me to move to Ropes Gray, was the title of well-being. And well-being really encompasses the whole person. So their emotional well-being, their career well-being, their financial well-being, their social well-being. And I did a lot of research, and there was a great book that came out from the Gallup folks by Jim Hartner and Tom Raith called Well-Being. And it was like 5 basic functions of well-being, which I used as a model. This was about 5 years ago, that really informed and shaped the way to really look at a wellness and well-being program. So that's the big difference.
But why is that important? So people might know I used to be a lawyer, and I used to work at a firm very similar to Ropes Gray. Actually works at 2 firms very similar to Ropes Gray, Skadden Arps and Fried Frank. And, this is only 10 years ago now. I started in 2004, practiced through 2010. And I was the only person, I think, at either firm that ran a marathon. Like in fact, I timed my interview at Skadden to be the day after I ran the New York City Marathon for the first time in 2003. And one of the reasons I did is I wanted to really impress on my interview when I limped in there, and maybe exaggerated my limp a little bit. So they asked me why I was limping so I could brag about how I ran the New York City Marathon the day before. But it wasn't like, and we'd be up, you work so hard. You work really long hours. I'm sure that hasn't changed. And, you're up all night, and, one of my friends' nickname was Meatball because he would just literally pound Red Bulls and eat meatball subs while we were working late at night. And it was almost even celebrated to be somewhat unhealthy. So how, and I guess but I do also remember at the time that there were studies at the time about how the legal profession was so unhealthy, and how it had a higher rate of substance abuse and a higher rate of suicide and a higher rate of mental illness than other professions. And by the way, just having a higher rate than other professions don't mean the other professions are doing great either. I think that, the other, I think a lot of professions and people generally are unhealthy, but it's certainly no distinction to want to have to be the highest or higher than the others in that respect. But what happened that people decided to say, you know what, we need to really take this seriously and make some changes within our firm culture?
Yeah, it's one of these things. It's in everybody's best interest. And again, the data is in. If you have a healthy firm or a healthy company, a healthy workforce, you have a healthy firm, for example. So yes, it's twofold. So yes, there's of course the, ROI, return on investment. That's what you heard all the time as I got deeper and deeper in the wellness industry. That was the biggest sell of companies selling their wares. Oh, the ROI, you'll save X amount of dollars. What was really surprising, and I'm saying this after a decade, that wasn't the thing. That was secondary. It is what people want. They want people to, what we like to say at Ropes, part of our mission is for members of the firm to bring their best selves to work. Inherently, because it's like the right thing to do. It's like built into the fabric of who we are, bringing our best selves to work. So
I like this. So that's interesting, because when we started selling the employee empowerment program, we always had companies reaching out to us that wanted something like that, which is why we built it. But I kind of didn't do enough diligence up front, so that as we were getting ready to launch it, and I was like, oh, well, now I have to sell. So how do I, go sell this to companies? What are the things that I need to talk about? And a lot of it was like, oh, you need to talk about the ROI, how you're going to help them save on healthcare costs, and you're going to help them, you're going to increase productivity, and you're going to, they'll be able to, if they invest this much in you, they're going to make this much back. And I was like, I don't know how the heck I'm going to show that, right? Like, how on earth am I going to be able to show that I'm saving you this much on healthcare costs, or that your productivity went up? So were you ever able to really measure that with any kind of wellness or well-being initiative that you took on, and at Ropes or in any of the other kind of corporate wellness programs you've been a part of?
You can see things like in the data. They can show utilization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see, for example, with our employee assistance program, which many companies have, and I'll get to it a little bit as well, as a resource to use. But for many, certainly in my first job in the industry, they were like, don't even worry about the numbers. I started out in the benefits department.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, don't even worry about the numbers. We just want this. We want this off the ground. We want to make a positive impact. And that's what I'm finding where I go.
Mm-hmm.
It's making a positive impact and having people who are healthier and happier. Yeah, it's a win-win. It'll make your workforce more productive. There'll be less turnover, more retention. People get wind of the kind of program that you have, and that's a deciding factor for some people as well. And you can only imagine in the competitive world where you're trying to attract top talent, any company is, but especially law firms, you want to make sure you're competing against. Remember, this all got really popular with the things, like Google out there.
Right. Yeah.
They set the bar with this, crazy programming that they would have. And so, but there's expectations. Like, for example, when I mentioned the well-being programs, the lawyer well-being programs, law schools were part of this. So many law students, for example, already have robust well-being programs in their law school. So it's an expectation now. So part of it is that piece, to attract and retain the best talent. But that's like a piece of a pie. That's a little piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger piece of the pie goes back to a happy and healthy workforce, because it feels good.
Yeah.
It sounds a little esoteric, and who knew? But again, I was, when I had the opportunity to look closely at Ropes and Gray, the deciding factors wasn't just because, it was, I don't know anything about big law as well. What I noticed was, oh my God, they call it well-being and not wellness. Boom. And that is definitely where I wanted to go. And then
we can maybe jump into like that difference between wellness and well-being. But one thing I thought was interesting to maybe tie it back to the difference between pre-COVID and post-COVID on what you were just saying is, pre-COVID, like as I was saying, as I was going out and like in the early months of, January and February selling the employee empowerment program, I was getting all these, I would often get questions, not all the time. The companies that signed on didn't really ask this type of stuff like you, but like, they would be asking me for the ROI, like, do you see an increase in productivity? And then when COVID happened, and a lot of what we were doing was outbound, like with you, like I cold emailed you and you replied back like right away, which is amazing. When COVID happened, it totally flipped. And now we're just getting inbound from companies and nobody's asking about ROI. They just want to do the right thing. They just want to help make their employees happier. They want to make their employees healthier, and they want to give back. And it's kind of like almost in a weird way at this time when you think that people would be really focused on ROI with everything that they're doing because the economy's a little bit more challenged.
Yeah.
COVID has kind of just also reframed the priority of like, we just need to do something that feels good. I think that's at least my interpretation of it.
Well, so let me just say one thing too. You're giving me all the credit that I emailed you, but guess what?
What?
You know how I found you? You came into my inbox. Leadership.
Oh, really?
Leadership. Yeah, I think you reached out to our leadership, and right away, I think it was the next day, I saw the email. Hey, what do you think? Let's bring him in. Oh,
well, there you go.
So
well, I cold emailed someone at your company, and they passed me to you. But like, you know, it's amazing that you know, you guys had the instinct to want to do that, and we're grateful. It says a lot about. I think it says a lot about you guys as a firm that you were willing to do that up front. So thank you, and thank you to your leadership.
Yeah, and now you have to remind me. Sorry, I really wanted to mention that. You have to remind me of the question you just asked.
Well, it was about the pre-COVID and the post-COVID. How things almost like the desire to just want to do something good kind of took preeminence.
Yep. So what happened, what I found is that all of a sudden, and I like to call it, I have my own fun term, I call it the coronavirus pivot. And it was a pivotal moment. And then normally in a lot of the well-being stuff we do, we curate, we plan in advance. We want to have the perfect event, or we want to have vetted resources, or we vet our speakers. Like it is you know, we don't just fly. Certainly we don't here at Ropes Gray. We don't fly by the seat of our pants at all.
Yeah, no,
right?
You don't.
You know, we're a company, we're a firm of excellence. We're a firm of excellence. So, with that said, all of a sudden, well-being became one of the most important things you need to do for the people that you have at the firm. That was it. It was shine a light, and it was immediate, and it was reactive. And so we moved into high gear, so I can share some of the things that we did.
Yeah, and also, like, what are like the principles of well-being? So for people who, you know, aren't as lucky to work at a firm like Ropes and Gray, maybe some of the people listening to this are in a similar position to you, are at their own firms or companies. But you know, many of the people listening to this are either, you know, employees or entrepreneurs. Like, how can, or just, you know, not working right now, but how can we put these principles of well-being that you've learned and that you're putting into place into practice in our own lives?
Yeah, so I can say that just first and foremost, if you're a company or a firm and you're a smaller size, or even a large one that might have a dedicated well-being program, you can always look towards your employee assistance program. And I mentor a lot of people starting out in the industry or new to the roles, and I've mentored based on utilizing all the internal resources you already have. So they do exist. I'll give you a quick example here at Ropes and Gray. Our well-being initiative, we just launched our official branding. It's called Be Well at Ropes and Gray, and it's based on 3 pillars of emotional well-being, physical well-being, and financial well-being. Those are our 3 pillars that we focus on, and a lot comes under each one. But the things really now, when it comes to, initially when it came to Corona, the initial lockdown and completely pivoting to a remote work environment, self-care. It was self-care. And we hear the term self-care bandied about, but what it really means is it's almost like taking care of your basic needs so you can handle adversity. And we'll talk a little bit about resiliency and stress in a minute. So things like, I like to talk about self-care in 4 ways. Very simply, things like stressing less. So learning how to manage stress. is one key. What are the tools you can use? And I created a toolkit. We created a toolkit with these idea of just something foundational. So stress less, eat well, move more, and sleep soundly. So all of a sudden, we had to make this huge adjustment to a changed way of life that was scary and uncertain. And so we wanted to provide some foundational principles for people to anchor themselves to. These anchor points are really important in times of uncertainty like we were all experiencing. And so that was one of the first things that we did. So now we still have to hold on to them. They're always important. But now with our extended, for a lot of us, phase 2 for a number of cities, phase 2 is all about maybe I can go to the hair salon, but I still can't get to the office, or I can't do other social activities, or I still haven't hugged my mom in 4 months.
Right.
So the emphasis of how do we keep these practices going, or how do I restart them, or how do I get them going, because I really was having trouble doing it. So it's the same thing. So if you are if you don't have that kind of guidance for someone in a role that I have, finding those key anchor points can be really helpful.
So can you go through those? I think you said 4 or 5, like eat well, sleep well, move well. Can you say those again, just to make sure I got them?
Okay, so the four kind of self-care principles that I like to talk about are stress less. Okay,
that's hard as a lawyer.
Okay, but you know what? I wanted to address this too because you mentioned it. You know, the whole idea of addressing lawyer well-being, and that when I say lawyer well-being, that also includes support business support as well. Sure. We're all in it. We're all in it together. Yep. So with lawyer well-being, and you know, we're not going to reinvent the wheel or say that, you know, we don't have to stay up late and put in time and hours. And it really is a challenge to our well-being. But one of the biggest pieces, and this is part of what our well-being initiative is grounded in, is how to make it, how to maintain better health and well-being with the demands of being a lawyer, right? And so there's a big difference. You just mentioned it. How about instead of Red Bulls and meatballs, how about drinking water, having a well-balanced meal, and taking mindfulness breaks? Right. Oh my God, look at the difference, right? So you have the same situation. And guess what? Guess who's going to come out better on the other end? Guess who might not burn out? Guess who might not develop a substance use issue? Guess who might learn how to have better work-life balance? You know, maybe they're better able to handle outside stress in their life, right? And so those are really important pieces. And the other piece that I can share with you too is that we're really practical. So we're not giving complicated kind of how-tos. Our how-tos are designed to be really accessible and really easy. So we're not when I say stress less, we're not asking somebody to go off on an airplane and go to some ashram in India for 2 weeks, right? Right, sounds like a great idea.
Actually, I had a friend at Skadden who actually did that and didn't come back.
Oh my God, that's hysterical. But what we are teaching people, did you know? And you know, we could do this. You know what? I'm going to do this because this is what I do. I'm also a practitioner as well. So I think we can teach everybody who's listening as well. And so I'm going to ask you to take a pause in your walk, and I'm going to do it with you. I'm going to show people how they can have a little stress-less break in 30 seconds. So obviously, Jean, you and I are outside, so I moved myself onto the sidewalk. So I'm going to have everybody, if they're listening, take a pause if you can in a safe area and close your eyes. And then take a nice deep inhale for 3 seconds through your nose. And take a sigh out of your mouth. Let's do that one more time. Take a nice deep inhale through the nose. And a nice deep sigh out of your mouth. And then slowly open your eyes. So that's right. And so suddenly now I'm looking around. I'm like, oh, there's the trees and there's nature. I paused for a moment. I hit the reset button. And what that helps to do, without getting too scientific, it helps activate our relaxation response we have built into our body. So it helps quell that fight or flight, the chronic stress. And it's like little doses, right? These beautiful little natural ways we can combat our reactions to stress. And some of us have been chronically reacting to stress. So this is how we help people.
Do you schedule that in to do it like at regular intervals during the day, or do you kind of just do it whenever you feel like you need to?
So it's two ways. So one of the things we did, another thing we did right away that we found out that was a big need at the firm, wasn't just the Global Physical Activity Challenge. Even before that, it was about, we already had local in-person with dial-in mindfulness meditation sessions, 10 to 15 minutes in some of our bigger offices. Right away, as we became a remote workforce, same thing. We were planning it right from leadership. Hey, it would be great if we could roll this out on a firm-wide level, which meant globally. So we began a mindfulness meditation series with volunteer in-house facilitators over 6 time zones for once a week. So, however, we have 3 different series, so you can even meditate more than once in your time zone. It just so happens to come out that way. We are actively teaching a longer 10-minute kind of way you can do it. We also launched on our internal intranet, we have recorded audio. So you can have a 1-minute, 5-minute, or 10-minute mindfulness meditation session right from the intranet. You just click the link, the recording's there. And then of course, I've kicked off numerous town halls and big meetings with a short 5-minute mindfulness practice. And I did it in person when we were in the office, and I've done a number of them now. So people are actively asking for it as part of working with people together in their meetings. It's become an integral part of what we do. Yeah.
That's such an incredible culture change from what I remember of working at a firm. It's amazing. So stress less, eat well.
Move more.
Move more and sleep well.
Sleep soundly.
Sleep soundly.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. And how are you helping people integrate, for example, moving more or sleeping soundly into their day?
So one of the things we did, funny you should ask, right? So the moving more, we did a couple of things. So we have a coronavirus information page on our intranet, right on the banner, right on the landing page. And on there was a whole host of informational, company-wide, firm-wide initiatives. And one of them was the health and well-being tab on there. And so as we created, as I mentioned, the self-care toolkit, we also created the home workout toolkit and the psychological health toolkit. And these toolkits provide those resources. So for example, and our infonet, our internal intranet page as well, has a whole list of resources for sleeping soundly. So the most important thing we wanted to do was to give people the tools that they needed to do it. And then I also gave a number of presentations, for example, on the self-care for working remotely toolkit. and put that into a presentation where we can have more of a deeper discussion, for example, of things like sleeping soundly. And then moving more, yeah, and it's interesting because it's not just telling people to walk 10,000 steps. No, we all know that. We've had Fitbits for 10 years, almost 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we're in shelter-in-place orders. A lot of our population are in cities and apartment buildings.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are home with their kids, so we can't just tell people to move more. So the toolkit had, fun workouts for your kids and teens, how to get your teens to move more, and moving with your teens, how to move with your kids. We did apartment workouts so you won't drive your neighbor crazy. Right? These are the things you have to think about. Like, these are the things that came up that you might not have originally thought of when creating kind of a move more program. And then the other thing, I have a coaching background, and I've already coached the virtual population. So I was really lucky that I already had experience in dealing with a virtual population, because now the entire firm was working remotely and will be doing so until the end of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality with 2 big offices. We've got 6 U.S. offices, 2 of which are in huge skyscrapers.
Mm-hmm.
Actually
Exactly.
3. I'm like, 3, yeah, 3 for these huge skyscrapers.
Right.
So there's a lot of issues around that. So we have to be really practical. And
Did you find that
ways.
people are moving more during Corona, or do you find that the Corona made it so that it was harder for people to be active? Because we've seen an actual huge increase in activity in the app since Corona. More people walking a lot more.
So it's kind of 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. So people have gained some of their time that they might have been commuting to now devote to their exercise. Hang on, there's a big garbage truck coming by.
Yeah. Happens all the time. It's part of the charm of a walking podcast.
Excellent. So, while you have more people getting outside, maybe to get their 10,000 steps or to do their run or their jog, when they can, or their home workout from their new favorite app, right?
Exactly.
What's happening is you're losing all the other physical activity that you normally do, walking around the office or getting to work on your commute, going to the grocery store, going to this store, going to that store, especially for city dwellers who are doing a tremendous amount of walking in general in their everyday lives.
Right.
So that is more of a challenge. It's more important to stay active throughout the day. I don't want to say maybe it's equally as important to stay active throughout your day than just get kind of one bout of kind of 30-minute exercise. Both are hugely important, and it doesn't have to happen all at one time. So that's the important piece too. So the real challenge is getting people to move, but now we're totally limited. We don't have an office to go up and down to. We don't have some place to go walk for lunch.
Right.
There are people who are getting their steps and literally walking around their kitchen.
Right. Walking to and from the fridge.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where eating well comes in.
Yeah. So again, for the people who aren't as lucky to work for a firm like Ropes and Gray, what are your tips for how to implement these principles into our own daily lives?
So really, I think the easiest thing, the kind of the most accessible way that I like to talk, I learned about this kind of concept at a really cool conference when I first started at Ropes. I attended this great conference on well-being, and it's all about, think of a door wedge, right? That you wedge into a door to keep it open.
Yep.
Think about that smallest part of the wedge, right? And that will open the door. That little piece of the wedge will crack that door open. And that's a great way to look at your own well-being. It's not going to be the big overt thing you do once or twice a month. It's going to be short little practices. And I like to tell people it's all in the how. Part of my job as a wellness coach was all, everybody kind of knows the what. There's a million. We know we should eat well and, move more and stress less, but it's the how. How do we do it? It's these kind of like parlance and called micro habits, right? These little interventions. I like to joke around with people. I had really fallen out of a meditation practice for quite some time. And I literally, in order to get my meditation practice off the ground, I promised myself in the beginning of 2019 that I'd start with 30 seconds in the morning.
Right.
And I
That's
did it sitting. I brushed my teeth. I sat down on my bath mat for 30 seconds. Of course, it ended up being maybe a minute. But yeah, that was how and I didn't continue doing it every single day, but that was the opening door for me that, you know what, I took away the chatter in my head. Oh, you're some wellness pro and you're only doing 30 seconds. No. We all have our struggles. And for me, that was a struggle. But that one little piece opened me up. I don't meditate, every single morning now, but mindfulness is a huge piece of my life now, having a practice. And so that little example, it's the same thing. You know what? Maybe instead of taking on eating well when it's, it might be challenging or you never cooked or you're dealing with your whole family at home, maybe it's as simple as, you know what? I am going to get that water bottle sitting in the closet. I'm going to fill it up. I'm going to put it on my desk. And in the morning, my goal is to have at least 50% of the water sitting there in my tumbler.
Yep.
Because little victories build confidence.
Yeah.
And and then you build mastery, right? And so we just have to get that voice, that critical voice out of our head.
I love that. There's an author that I read a lot. His name is B.J. Fogg. I'm not sure if you've ever read B.J. Fogg, but he's out of the Stanford Business and Design School, and he wrote the book on like anybody who's in the app space or the tech space reads him, because he's all about how to make your product habit forming. How do you help people create habits around whatever it is that you're trying to help them create habits around? And now he's really into how do people help themselves create the habits that they want to create. And he talks about tiny habits. So if you want to create a habit around flossing your teeth, start by just flossing one tooth, right? That's going to be your habit, is flossing one tooth. Or if you want to create a habit of doing push-ups, don't say, okay, I'm going to do 100 push-ups every day. Just do one push-up every day. And make that this tiny little habit that you do. And then, maybe all you do is one push-up a day, but most likely you'll end up graduating to doing, 2 push-ups, 3 push-ups, 10 push-ups, and then 100 push-ups. But just start with the tiny habits. The water one is a big one for me. Whenever I find myself that I need to get myself back on track, the thing that I do is I say, all right, I'm gonna make sure that I drink. I have a big Nalgene bottle, 32 ounces, and I say, all right, I'm gonna have this done before lunch. Mm-hmm. And that's the one that I do that helps get me back on track. So I love that you use that as an example.
Yeah, they're really important.
How has we had this pivotal moment around well-being with COVID, and then I feel like we've also had another pivotal moment that have come up where recently with all the social justice issues that have come to light, and I'm curious how that may have shined a new light on well-being within the firm or within company cultures even more generally.
Yeah, well, I can't speak of other company cultures, but I was excited to join the firm already with their social justice pro bono work. I mean, landmark. They've the firm has had their hand in landmark decisions of social justice and equality, diversity issues, and now there is a dedicated diversity and inclusion director, and not only that, but the firm is grounded in diversity and inclusion, and I've never been prouder as well. And it's also really timely because I've read another report that came down through the Supreme Judicial Court of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that started their own standing committee on lawyer well-being. And in this report, they addressed inclusion and diversity in specific. And if those needs aren't met, there is a host of mental health issues that can arise from those in diverse populations, and that it's imperative to address them. And so when I started my well-being journey in a career, it was, you always want to be as inclusive as you can. And this has been a tremendous learning as a both personally and professionally, that just, thinking, oh, we're so inclusive. We start from the bottom up. We make sure we have activities that cover this person and that person. Well, I had my own veil on. And, it's again, I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I'm already learning, and the firm is so dedicated to teaching us. And so we have speakers at the moment talking about these difficult issues. And so it's really opened my eyes to be how can we be even more inclusive? What are the other considerations that we can have? And I think this is taking this pivotal moment for change. And no matter, like, I'm speaking to a wide, diverse group here, and whatever team you lead or whatever group you lead, take that veil off and think bigger and think wider, because it certainly happened. It happened to me as well. And so I've learned a tremendous amount. Yeah.
Well, one thing that you just kind of gave me a thought of, which I'm not sure why I didn't think of before, because I think of it a lot, is kind of like the intersection of well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, spiritual well-being, and diversity. And one of the things that I've loved most, and it's actually the reason that I do this podcast as a walking or running podcast, is that I feel that when you're actually moving together with somebody, you can have a much richer and deeper conversation than you can than when you're just sitting across the table from them.
Yeah.
And almost like the way that the body language is, like when you're sitting across the table from someone, is almost oppositional. Whereas like when I'm running with somebody, or if I'm walking with somebody, we're moving in the same direction. And the conversation might go in all sorts of different ways, but our breaths are in sync, our steps are in sync. And it kind of helps, like my best friends as an adult have come through running with people. And I have just an incredibly diverse group of friends that I've gotten to meet through running. Ooh, some ambulances going by. Hope that doesn't make it into the podcast. Part of the charm of a walking podcast. But, I find that just when you're walking with people, when you're running with people, when you're moving with people, sports, we just did a podcast with actually my old law school professor, Bob Bordone, who is the head of the negotiation program at Harvard. And he talked about how sports has this unique capability of bringing people who might otherwise be totally opposed to each other or different backgrounds, and bringing people together in a way where you can find common ground. And there could be some interesting intersections there to, the way that the well-being and the diversity programs come together, either at a firm like Ropes, or just even more generally, like how do we use these concepts that you were talking about to really, I think, like you said, bring us all closer together with more understanding. Actually, the exercise that you said with that we did with the breaths, where you center, you just like, I think everybody just needs to do that right now, and like just kind of like relax a little bit, and take some of the tension that's out of the air, so that we're not so keyed up against each other right now.
Well, I think the important thing, and I think the other piece too, and I'm going to use this walking metaphor, I think it's really appropriate, and maybe this is the stuff behind charity miles, right? That might now, in context of everything, let's walk more in other people's shoes.
Yes.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
And I think
that's right.
I think for a lot of people, we were walking in our own shoes for too long. And it's time to walk in someone else's shoes with eyes wide open. And I think that's the lesson that I've learned as well. And we can literally, Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's amazing. That's I love that. That's fantastic. Katherine, thank you so much. You shared so much with us today, and thank you for your partnership and for helping us in so many ways, all your feedback on the employee empowerment program and just everything. So just truly, truly grateful. And thank you for taking the time to share all of this with us today.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was my pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Thanks to everyone out there for joining us. Walk in someone else's shoes. Every mile matters. Thanks, Katherine.
Bye.